It's time to engage, educate, and empower with Tracey Maxfield.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Engage, Educate, and Empower, the podcast which aims to highlight the social issues, life challenges, and day-to-day problems our children, teenagers, and young adults are dealing with globally. Now, as you're very well aware, it is a very challenging and stressful time for everyone as we're now dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. I want to take a very quick moment to remind everyone that as we practice social distancing and either mandatory or voluntary self-isolation, that we need to remember not to forget our kids. Recent reports on the news have indicated, sadly, that not only has domestic violence increased during this time, but also child abuse. Cyberbullying is now an absolute epidemic. So just because your kids are not in school, sadly, bullying is continuing in the form of cyberbullying. And then when out in society, unfortunately, we are seeing that many kids of Asian descent are being targeted. I urge you, as counselors, parents, teachers, guardians, family members, siblings, neighbors, or just as an adult, to please look out for kids in your apartment complex, in your street, in your neighborhood. If you see something, if you hear something, please report it. There are hotlines to report child abuse and neglect. Alternatively, reach out. Follow up with the do a drop-by visit, maintain social distance, check if they need anything, is everything okay? Maybe send a text, make a phone call, connect via social media. But if you notice that maybe the kids that were in the house are now not around at all and don't even seem like they're at home, or if you see or hear things that indicate that maybe life is not so good and there are constant disruptions, then please do follow up and report it. So today I have a very special guest who has lived through life's trials and tribulations and truly knows what homelessness and hardship is like. Je'net Kreitner is a best-selling author, CEO and founder of Grandmother's House of Hope, as well as several other incredible outreach programs. Je'net has overcome many trials that have helped her grow and fueled her desire to help others. She is a great example of turning life's harshest lessons into life's greatest blessings. After repressed memories of childhood sexual abuse surfaced in her mid-30s, Je'net experienced a series of unfortunate and catastrophic events, including a relationship with a controlling man that ended badly. She found herself homeless in California with a young son to take care of. After many months of struggling to survive on the streets and bouncing from one motel to another, an angel entered her life. A man she had met briefly saw something in Je'net as he visited with her, a goodness and potential that many overlooked because of her circumstances. After visiting her only once, he offered to take both her and her son into his home. His faith in her and the unconditional help he offered them allowed Je'net to land back on her feet, and eventually they were married. Today, Je'net wants her programs to offer others the help and hope that she once so desperately lacked in her life, and the support that allowed her to overcome immense trials and realize her amazing potential. Je'net began her incredible journey to pay it forward at a monthly homeless outreach offered at a church in Orange, California, as well as volunteering with the Gleaners Jail Ministry program. But after the death of her mother, she wanted to do more. She began by taking women into her home that she had befriended at a bus stop. The women lived with Je'net and her family for a few months until they were able to find another home and get back on their feet. After that, the guest room in their house was constantly occupied with people Je'net wanted to help. And one day, her husband remarked that there were more guests living in their home than family members. So Je'net did the only thing that made sense. She, her husband, and son moved out of the house and turned it into the very first shelter in 2004. It was then that Grandmother's House of Hope was founded as an effort to give back to a community that aided Je'net in rebuilding her life after she was homeless in 1991. Je'net has also created the Nana's Kids program, which is a weekend food program which provides meals to children living in motels when the free meals at school are unavailable. And she also started the Hope Works. It's an education and enrichment center, which is an after-school program for high-risk kids in low-income neighborhoods. This program keeps children off the streets and out of gangs. Today, Je'net is considered a hero by the thousands of people whose lives she has blessed and is honored for her wonderful work. She has received a recent award, the prestigious Spirit Summit in Los Angeles. Today, Je'net continues to spread her messages of hope and healing through speaking platforms. So we're going to take a very quick commercial break, and when we return, it will be my very, very great pleasure and honor to introduce Je'net Kreitner. Stay right.
Tracey Maxfield is a retired nurse with over 36 years' experience in mental health and dementia. She has spent years studying, researching, and writing on dementia care, mental illness, and bullying in teenagers. Tracey struggled with chronic depression starting in her 20s, and after years of intense workplace stress, bullying, and harassment, her chronic depression intensified. Tracey wrote her book, Escaping the Rabbit Hole: My Journey Through Depression, as a way not to only relieve her stress and anxiety, but to help her friends and family better understand depression. The book became an international guide for mental health awareness, allowing Tracey to focus her attention on helping children, teenagers, and their parents work through mental health issues and bullying. She travels all over the world to meet with schools, mental health advocates, and experts in the mental health fields. She also offers online courses to help children, teenagers, and their parents work through issues, bringing families closer and to bring awareness to bullying in society. For more information on Tracey, her mission, the show, Tracey's book, and offered courses, visit TraceyMaxfield.com. You can see the latest news on mental health, upcoming guests on the podcast, read Tracey's blogs and articles, and more. Plus, follow Tracey all over social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube to watch the podcasts. See her daily messages and motivation and learn about each podcast guest and experts. Plus, while you're on the website at TraceyMaxfield.com, be sure to sign up for the free monthly newsletter. Follow Tracey with her upcoming events, interviews, seasonal tips, and the latest articles discussing important mental health topics and issues. And when you subscribe, you'll get a free copy of Tracey's booklet, Why Our Kids Are Suffering and How We Can Help Them. Just go to TraceyMaxfield.com. Tracey is committed to bringing parents and their children closer, to battle bullying and bring awareness to the mental health of children. That's why Tracey is offering her online courses to any adults, parents, children, and teenagers struggling during those hard times. Sign up for the course at TraceyMaxfield.com. You'll receive 8 full modules, over 12 videos, resources, and support discussing mental health, mood disorders, eating disorders, behavioral disorders, social media, drugs, suicide, risks and signs, and much, much more. Plus, you'll get access to Tracey's private Facebook group for individuals going through the same thing you are. Connect with others and share ideas, support, and motivation with Tracey helping along the way. Tracey's online courses is now for a limited time available for only $158. See all information online at traceymaxfield.com, where a brighter future is possible.
So, welcome back, everyone. And as promised, I'd like to introduce you to a very special guest today, Je'net Kreitner. Je'net, thank you so much for coming on to this podcast. And as I told everyone in the introduction, you have quite an amazing story that we need to share today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
My pleasure. So, why don't we begin at the beginning? Why don't you share what happened to you that's brought you to this point today?
Well, the story can be as short or as long as you'd like it to be, but I think for the purposes of your audience, the most important part of my story to start with is when I was young. At 3 years old, I was molested by a babysitter. Told my parents, which you would hope a young girl would do. I went and told the people that I thought would protect me. And I even remember my dad taking the young man out on the front porch and giving him a good talking to about, being appropriate and sending him on his way, clearly not to ever return. That evening, my father came into my bedroom and asked me to show him what the babysitter had done to me, and took it as a green light to start molesting me himself.
Oh,
so he clearly didn't tell anyone ever again. Buried it and buried the abuse that started to happen on a very regular basis. When I was 6 years old, I now have memories recovered of my father taking me to an underground pornography ring and trafficking pictures of myself out into whatever dark community he was involved in. Strange part about it was, if you looked at my family from the outside in, we looked like a very normal, happy family with kids in campfire and boys in, guitar lessons. And, we looked like the upper middle class family in Orange County back then. But behind closed doors, things were definitely taking a very bad turn for the worse. So I literally stuffed these feelings for the next 11 years until my father passed away, ironically on Father's Day. He had a massive heart attack and died in my arms. And his abuse stopped at that point, obviously. But my brother, who is also a victim, picked things up where he left off.
Oh.
And so we, at the time, were living in Ohio, returned to Irvine, California for my last 2 years of high school, and the abuse continued for my 15th, 16th, and 17th year when I left home to go to college. I didn't remember any of this until I was much older. I found my release and my recovery and my healing, or my coping mechanisms, actually by throwing myself entirely into music and theater. So
Right.
I used to sing. I went to college on an opera scholarship, double majored in music or theater, and got my equity card with the American Conservatory Theater, and found it very, I found a huge release in being somebody else.
Right. Yes.
I could throw myself into that. It was always very uncomfortable being my own person. So if I was, for instance, if I was singing a song that was in a show and I had a character, that really resonated with me. But singing a song that had to tap into my own personal feelings was much more difficult. So time went on. I had a pretty successful career in the entertainment industry. Doing musical theater, my love. And when I was 34 years old and I had a 3-year-old son, I did a show called Homeless, a street opera. Again, kind of an ironic twist, because I played a woman who was she was 9 months pregnant, a heroin addict, and homeless. And when I was playing the part, nothing other really connected to me, but the story of her past and my past were very connected. So she had grown up in a similar situation, although socioeconomically very different. And her mother had not protected her from her father, and these things like were like lining up like in a really very similar way, but still not resonating with me until the show closed. A family member took me out for breakfast and told me what it had brought up for him, and it was like that classic scene in a movie where memories start falling into place, and you realize that things that you had just kind of tucked away were highly inappropriate.
Okay.
Completely fell apart. So within 3 years, I was homeless on the street myself with my then 6-year-old son. On January 24th, 1994, I spent the night in a phone booth with my then 6-year-old son. And it was right after the Northridge earthquake, and didn't have a penny to I had $20 in my pocket and 2 suitcases.
Oh my goodness.
Rollers in those days. Yeah. Yeah. So my life story is about coming back from that, is about finding a spiritual awakening and a purpose for my life. So now my goal in life and my mission in life is to run the nonprofit charity that my husband and I founded called Grandma's House of Hope, where we help people get back on their feet from a homeless situation and address hunger issues for youth.
Awesome. So your son, obviously, that must have been a very, very difficult time for him, trying to make sense of what was happening. As the years progressed, how did he handle it when he became a teenager? How was he doing?
By the time I was a teenager, I knew that. I'm super proud of my son. I'm always amazed when I talk to people about where we were in that phone booth that night, and at the end of sharing my story, I can bring up the fact that my son is now a very respectable police officer for Amtrak PD, and then for the BNSF Railway. He's a special agent now, also a reservist in the Army.
Awesome.
And he plays a pretty kick-ass bagpipe.
Good.
Love
it.
He was able to compete in Scotland when he was 18 years old and placed 4th in the world.
That's
but the journey there was not easy for him, and there were many times when I noticed he would go out into the front yard and he would just thrash around with heavy metal music in his ears, and just I could see the aggression just wanting to leave his body. He was a black belt in Taekwondo at, I think, 16. One of those kids where you actually could hear the wind whip when he moved. Right now he's learning how to dance the shag.
Sweet.
Yeah, it's an exceptional young man. I'm very proud of him. But certainly not an easy journey to come through what he did, and taking the decisions that he made to turn things into good and into service makes me very proud.
And it's kudos to you as well, because I think children go through so many different experiences, and some are very, very less fortunate than others. But if you have love and support and guidance, I think that those are the kids that kind of move forward more purposeful and have more compassion and understanding, I think, for others. But definitely, you were mum, but you were a great guidance and a role model as well. And I think that's what's helped him keep on that track, because in the work that you've done, especially with your center, to try and keep kids off the street and off, stop them joining gangs, he could have also gone down that route.
Yes, he could have. And, to be fair, he watched me struggle with addiction during the course of time that I was trying to cope with, the fact that my family turned their back on me when these things came up. So I used substances. I drank, and I used cocaine to try to numb those memories and numb the process that I was going through. And he had to watch that, even though I had custody with his father, and thought I was hiding it from him. You can't, right? Kids are aware. And we've had conversations about that, since then. And I think it even more so would have been easy for him to follow down that same pathway. So I'm really glad that he actually chose to be a quote unquote straight edge in high school,
Yes.
with no drugs, no alcohol, no sex. I don't know if he kept true to all of those things, but he definitely took a stand very early that he was going to really step past what had happened in his past and what he'd been exposed to.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you opened Grandma's House of Hope.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, which is just amazing. And that's, as I said, after hearing your story on another podcast, that's why I felt, okay, this is so relevant and needs to be shared. And I mean, it's obviously still going strong. You've also introduced lots of other programs that you support and that you help. What prompted you to do the program for the kids, especially who are in low-income families and we consider high risk?
That's our Nana's Kids program. And I think, everybody has a bottom they hit at one point or another, especially when you're homeless. You remember a particular moment. And for me, that was one afternoon when, by this time, mind you, I had arranged for my son to stay with his paternal grandma during the week and go to school. And I would do whatever I needed to do to make sure that I had a nice motel room to bring my son to on Friday afternoon and keep him with me till Sunday. And it was on one of these occasions when I literally had change that I was counting out on the counter for to pay for the motel room that night. I think I had somewhere in the neighborhood of 27 cents left over afterwards. And we walked out of the motel office with a key to the room into the parking lot, which was adjacent to a Carl's Jr. And we could smell those hamburgers cooking from across the parking lot. And he looked at me and I knew what he wanted. And I need to buy him a 99-cent hamburger. I will never forget that. We went to a room, you go to a motel room and they don't stock it for you. Your cabinets don't have food in it. You're lucky if there's, water you can drink in the room. And I certainly wasn't staying at lush motels with my son. So I will never forget that moment of being a parent and not being able to feed a hungry child. So when we got back on our feet, a little family project that we put together was to put 10 bags of food together as a family. And we would take them over to the local motel near our home and we drop them off on a weekly basis, 10 bags to the property manager. And he would make sure that it got out to any family that looked like it was in need. And that really stuck. That stuck. So when we started Grandma's House of Hope, we expanded. We now are serving, we served our 3 millionth meal a year ago.
Wow.
Kids and families living in motels. And our specific criteria is that they're on the free lunch program at school. They rely almost entirely on the school cafeteria as their primary source of food, and therefore go hungry from Friday until Monday morning. So our program was originally meant to bridge that gap, and also for holiday breaks when the school cafeteria wasn't available. Currently in this climate with COVID, we were serving around in the neighborhood of 175 bags a month for Nana's Kids right now, each of them containing enough food for 28 meals. And all of our program sites have begged us to increase our distribution because there's such a need for it. In our area, you have to go to the school with your children every day to get your breakfast and lunch. And for so many reasons, our kids who get bused to school, their families aren't going to do that for a breakfast and a lunch and then have to come back the next day for a breakfast and lunch. So we're piggybacking with that program, showing up on the Thursday or Friday, and we're giving them enough food to supplement all of that through the week and then through the coming week. So we went from 375 bags last month to a planned 1,495 bags with over 22,000 additional meals this month. Small grant to cover the first month of the service, but we obviously don't want to start and then have to stop. And,
yes.
And additional challenges we're facing is the food bank, where we normally get a lot of our food for this program. all the foods in your stores are off the shelves. They're not donating food that is close to their best if used by date to the food bank. They're selling everything they have. So the food bank is getting kind of food donations. So we have to kick it up and start buying wholesale. And then we have to overcome the obstacle of, you know, a limit of 2 boxes of oatmeal to any one customer. So we have a lot of challenges ahead of us. We're working with a lot of different partners. And of course, we need support to continue to keep this program moving forward. But it's so critical with everything else that a family is managing, including a lot of parents who have been laid off of jobs that they can't return to. And not being able to really teach their children at home, having the skills to be able to do the homeschooling. You can imagine that the family dynamic is getting heightened, and we're going to start seeing more domestic violence calls and that kind of thing. So we want to take off that weight of a hungry child, you know, their mom, like, you know, making her, you know, just heightening that whole, you know, emotional stress in the family unit.
No, absolutely. And it's interesting that you said that when I recorded my intro before I started reading out your bio, I actually said to the audience that with the pandemic and the self-isolation, whether it's mandatory or voluntary, the number of domestic violence cases and child abuse are rapidly increasing. And as members of a community, we really need to start looking out for those people and for the kids. And if you hear something or you see something, or just go and check on them. Because, we've seen already in one state, there's been 5 children in just under 2 weeks deceased due to abuse in the home. And we know it's a stressful time for lots of people, and everyone has different ways of handling these challenges, and sometimes they resort to not so nice ways, and our children are the ones that end up ultimately paying the price. So with this present pandemic we're not seeing any end in sight right now. Is your health center still open for the high-risk kids that are from the low-income families?
Sure. In addition to our Nana's Kids program and obviously our shelter program for people who are experiencing homelessness, we have a center called HopeWorks Education and Enrichment Center, and it is actually on site at a low-income Section 8 housing complex where we have 2,500 square feet, and we get to offer the families, after-school programming, adult education, early childhood development, and so on. And sadly, because of the 14-day and now extended 30-day stay-at-home orders by the governor, we're not allowed to bring the children to interact into the club after school. We are able to facilitate referrals and help for the families. We're certainly doing a lot in the way of food, not only from our Nana's Kids program, but we work with Bracken's Kitchen and the Anaheim White House to provide hot pasta and meals to our families as well. The computer lab is open for families for the adults in the family to come in and utilize. So we've started to develop our own kind of homeschooling project because, again, many of our kids don't have that support at home, and there's second language barriers and so on. So we're starting to send work home to the kids, and then we are acting as like the teachers and correcting the work, and then the kids get to earn cherry bucks to pick out prizes and things like that.
I love it. Absolutely love it. That is awesome. That is awesome.
We've had to get creative.
Yes, we do. We have to think outside the box. But I think that is amazing. I absolutely love that. So.
Well, I have to give kudos to my program manager over there, Linda Turner. She's really coming up with some incredible ideas to keep the kids engaged, to also keep our interns from local colleges who've been working with engaged as well, because they're looking at losing their internship hours potentially. So we have found really good ways to get them to work, creating ideas to keep the kids engaged, and we're managing it pretty well right now.
That's super.
Not having them all with us and yelling and running around all over the place, but we're doing the best we can.
No, because I mean, this is the time when we need love and connection and validation and to know we're not alone. And it's tough when there are restrictions put in how many can meet. And then the 6-foot social distancing, we are starting to learn a whole new communication method.
Yeah.
And, it's going to take some time to adjust to that. So
I'm such a hugger. So this is brutal to me.
Well, and it's interesting. I've just recently retired, but I was a nurse for 37 years. And always a hugger as a nurse. But as Tracey, I was not a hugger. And then after I fell down the rabbit hole and had my acute depressive episode and suicide and went through that healing process and wrote the book, which brought me to the work that I'm doing now, I think it was because I was in that dark place, isolated for so long, that when I emerged, I became a hugger. It's and people that have known me always, now I automatically reach out and hug. And I know the power of touch. As a nurse, that was very important. But now, and they're just looking at me going, oh, that's not you. That was never you. And I'm like, no, it is. And from your own personal experience of life on the street, and, then dealing with those repressed memories. After you've gone through something which really takes you almost to the pits of hell, and then you claw and fight your way back out, you emerge very differently. And I think the majority of us, I would like to say, emerge as better people, changed but more purposeful. I mean, you absolutely. And human connection and that emotion connection definitely plays a significant part. So yes, it is. It's very difficult with me. I keep forgetting myself because I want to go, and then there's this little voice that says 6 foot, 6 foot, 6 foot.
Right. And for me, I've always, our mission at Grandma's House of Hope is to empower the invisible. And I felt very strongly from the very beginning at Grandma's House, because when I was homeless, I felt like people couldn't see me. And,
right.
and more than that, they didn't want to take the time to understand the complexity of what was going on with me. It was, like I had a lot of people, family, friends, whatever, that just kind of would look at me and say, that happened a long time ago. Why can't you just get over it? And it's like, you don't get it. It's all like happening for the first time right now. Like I just had to say, and I felt like nobody really could see me. So at Grandma's House, I made it a personal pet project to know everybody's name in the program. So I think I did well until we prepped over 115 clients. So going to the house meetings every week, it would be a moment where I would go up to that woman or that man, and I'd look them in the eyes and I called them by name and give them a hug. And I could see it click every time.
Oh,
saying, well, Je'net knows my name now. Like she sees me, so losing now, we're going to be at 190 beds with 17 different shelter sites this year. And I just don't have the ability anymore to remember everyone's name. And I miss that a little bit, but I've tried to instill that in my staff so that they can continue that practice.
And it is. And I mean, the same thing applies with children and teenagers. And, when we're doing the podcast and we're talking about all different aspects of life for them and what they deal with, is that they need to be included. And as you said, no one wanted to take the time to get to know you or to hear your story, because we all have a story. And the same is true with kids. We know mental illness has increased, bullying has increased, drug addiction, suicide. I mean, it's an epidemic right now, and we're losing our kids. And you need to listen to them. You need, I think always when a child or a teenager has something to say, then we need to take that time to listen to them, because most of the time they don't want to say anything. It's like, yeah, I'm fine, leave me alone, whatever. And then when they have something they want to share or ask an opinion or are just confused about, if we invalidate that and just dismiss it, but I don't think a lot of adults understand the implications, because then it immediately devalues the kid, the child, the teenager, that they're not worthy of even having that kind of conversation. But also it gives them the sense that I'm too busy, I have more important things. Your issue really isn't that important, and just move on, it'll be fine. And then when it comes to something maybe a day or weeks down the road, they're reluctant to even open up because they're afraid they're going to get that door closed. And I mean, as adults, sometimes we can have that stronger voice of saying, oh, listen to me, I have something to say. When a child or a teenager does that, then they're seen as a tantrum or attention seeking or acting out. And, always say in the podcast to adults, to parents, whatever the relation of this child or teenager is to you, listen to what they have to say. It's the greatest gift that you can give them is your time, and to listen to them and be non-judgmental and just listen to what they have to say. Because lots of times you don't even have to figure out the problem for them. They can figure it out if you listen to them and kind of give them a little bit of guidance. So I think it's important when you stress, like, yeah, no one was listening to you and you had the voice. And so we do. And it's very sad that today it's the same thing. Homelessness is increasing. I mean, and the fact that kids are starving, it just breaks my heart, because I believe everyone is entitled to a roof over their head and a full belly every single day. When in your grandma's house of hope, you have women, now you've introduced men, which is great. Obviously, they're coming with families, yes?
Actually, no. Our program is for individual homeless.
Okay.
Experiencing homelessness. That being said, we our real focus is to try to sit in the gaps where there are no other services. So we take clients that have difficulty accessing or aren't qualified for other programs. So that's brought us to some very interesting, groups that we help.
Right.
That, the first time that a client was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I started to look out at how many women are walking around on the street never knowing they even have breast cancer because they haven't had any detection. We were getting them coming to us in 3rd and 4th stage cancer always, because they were just getting treated for pain. So we started a program called the Healing House that worked entirely for women who had terminal illnesses or cancer or debilitating illnesses that they needed to focus on getting healed physically first before they could move into the rest of their program of trying to get permanently housed, to getting a job and back on their feet, one thing before the other. And at the time, there were no programs that existed where you didn't have to come in and your first order of business was getting a job. And if you didn't have a job, you couldn't stay. Additionally, we work with women who are in the last trimester of pregnancy who can't get into a shelter program because they haven't been able to follow the pregnancy for the first 2 trimesters. And then they can have their babies with us, and they can also join our program if the children are under 6 months old.
Okay.
But in that situation, we are always trying to look for a family program so that the program that they go to has services for the children. So we do a lot of reunification work, because if you are trying to get into a family program and you don't have your children 51% of the time, you can't get into the family program.
Yes.
You have to start somewhere, and you have to be living somewhere where your children can visit and where they can eventually do the overnights and the weekends that get them to that place where mom can take over the 51%. So we do that. I really love to watch that process. I'm a foster parent myself. My husband and I are involved in a really specific foster care program called TIFCO. It's Treatment Foster Care Oregon is where it originated, and it's all about positive reinforcement models and getting the kids turned around and kind of not looking at what they might be doing wrong, for focusing entirely on everything they're doing right. And they have a wraparound team that's amazing. But all the kids we've worked with have been extremely traumatized in one way or another. So on my end, it's nice for me to share with the ladies in our program who sometimes look at foster parents as the bad guys, or threatened, by that situation and whatnot. My husband and I got into this specifically to say, we're not looking to adopt anybody. We don't want to keep your kids. We want to see you get back with your kids.
Right.
So when they hear that, I've had a couple of my clients, I've definitely say, you foster my children. And I was like, it doesn't really work that way, but but I think it's good for them to see that, a good role model on the other side of somebody who's invested in really trying to get the family unit back together, if that's the appropriate thing to do.
I agree. And that's absolutely awesome because, kids need role models. They need love. They need support. They need building blocks so they can, learn to develop their own coping strategies and how to navigate the world out there, because we've got a cruel world out. And if they're of a different culture, or if they're of a very low income poor family, then they have even more challenges to come up against. So, kudos to you. I just absolutely love everything that you're doing. Now, before we wrap up, I actually can see your book behind me on the bookshelf. Is that right? So that'll be awesome. Bring it up so we can see. Resurrecting Hope, Overcoming the Invisible Violence of Child Abuse. Awesome. And so obviously it is your life story.
It is.
Yes. So I think guidance time now. So if there's someone watching this that, is homeless or soon to be, or knows someone on the street that they may pass every single day, and they're thinking, why is she out there, or why is he out there? What is their story? What would you ask them to do? What would you encourage them to do?
I honestly feel like you need to follow your own heart and your instincts. And I know, people take hard stands, like I won't give a homeless person any money. And I think that as a general rule, it's better to hand somebody a meal than to hand them cash. But the flip side of that, I have to tell you this story that sticks with me. And I know this gentleman's probably forgotten he ever did this for me, but I was on my way to pick my son up from school when I was struggling, and I ran out of gas. The time I was living in my car, and I ran out of gas, and I was broke. I got out of my car. I sat on the little median right next to the car, and I wept. And this man stopped, and he asked me what was wrong. I told him. He not only went and got gas and brought it back and put it in my car, but then he handed me $20, which in 1994 was
a lot of money.
And I remember feeling seen. Like, he saw me. He saw my story. He saw a need, and he didn't even think twice about. He did. Maybe he thought about it all the way to get gas and back. Should I give her money? Should I not? But to me, that day, the difference he meant, I'm still talking about that day 25 years later. So, don't let something completely block you from doing something that somebody says you really shouldn't do, because I think you should be prayerful about it.
Yes.
And listen to your heart. And what's the worst that can happen is you do something nice for somebody, and they don't say thank you. Like, you really can't do it for the thank you. Right off the bat, I just want to say that it's not likely you're going to get a thank you. So don't do it for that. Do it for somebody speaking in your heart to do.
I agree. Yes. And, everything that we do, it should never be for a thank you.
Right.
It should be because it's something we want to do. We want to help. We want to pay it forward. We want to try and make a difference. We're not doing it for pats on the back. We're not doing it for money back. We're not doing it for rah-rahs. It's nice to get appreciation every once in a while, but at the bottom line is you're doing it because you're a good person, and for the grace of God goes I. They always say, we're all like one paycheck away.
I think we are.
We're all one paycheck away. And I think more and more people are noticing this more than ever, unfortunately, during this time. But it's be kind and reach out, because you don't know what's going on in anyone's world, and that little thing could make the whole difference to them.
Right. And just imagine what the words stay-at-home order mean to a person without a home.
Exactly.
You know?
Oh, I know. And I think that what's sad is that everyone is concentrating on giving everyone ideas on how not to become bored and how to maintain their mental health and wellness. And that is important. But we're also forgetting how many more are now at risk. And, when children are not in school, teachers don't have their eyes on them. And we know teachers are the highest number that will report concerns of mistreatment or abuse. And so as a society, I think this is more than ever when we need to step up.
Yeah.
And we need to look out. And I'm not on a soapbox by any means, but we need to look out for children, for teenagers, but we also need to look out for the older person and just for one another. I mean, humankind.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's just be kind. That's always my motto. It's like sprinkle kindness everywhere. It doesn't cost you anything. Just be kind.
Yeah.
So I could go on and on here. You have such an amazing story, and the work that you're doing is just, as I said, humbling, very humbling. I am so very grateful that you took time out of your busy schedule to actually come on to this podcast. No, honestly, because I feel every single person has something that they can share that can change someone's life. That somebody will be watching this or listening to this, and they'll just have not the repressed memories, but that light bulb moment of, this is what I'm now going to do. Every time I pass that lady sitting on the street corner, I'm actually going to give her a cup of coffee and see what's going on. The child that you always see that looks like he needs a new jacket and he's gazing, at the fast food place or something, get him some French fries. It's do the little things, because children they're our future, right? And we want to give everyone the very best chance they can to have a wonderful life.
We do. Yeah. Bless you for all of that, Tracey. You really set a great example.
Thank you. And Je'net, wow. All I can say is wow. I call them people earth angels. We have angels that have gone up, but there are also people that I say are earth angels, and you are an earth angel.
Aww.
And I think the world is a much better place because of you and the work that your husband does, and of your son and everyone that you've now involved in your organization. And so thank you so very, very much for everything that you do and for making a difference in people's lives, which is what we all want to do. So we're going to go for a very quick commercial break, and there you'll see how to get hold of Je'net's book, all her social media links, all the website links, everything you need to get hold of Je'net. And please do check her out, do follow her, and do look at the work that she's doing. And if you can volunteer because you live close, or if you have financial resources or know people that can help, please do so, because right now, all of us, we all need a hug, but we always need some help and support too. So we'll be right back.
Je'net Kreitner is a best-selling author, CEO, and founder of Grandma's House of Hope, as well as several other incredible outreach programs. After repressed memories of childhood sexual abuse that resurfaced in her mid-30s, Je'net experienced a series of unfortunate and catastrophic events, including a relationship with a controlling man that ended badly, and she found herself homeless in California with a young son to take care of. After getting back on her feet and her incredible journey, she decided to pay it forward at a monthly homeless outreach offered at her church in Orange, California, as well as volunteering with the Gleaners Jail Ministry program, but decided she needed to do more. That's when she founded the Grandma's House of Hope as an effort to give back to a community that aided her in rebuilding her life after she was homeless. The purpose is to empower the invisible. She also founded the Healing House program for homeless women with cancer. Today, Je'net is considered a hero by thousands of people. Make sure to check out her website at grandmashouseofhope.org, on Facebook and Instagram at Grandma's House of Hope, and find her on LinkedIn.
Welcome back, everyone, and I hope that you enjoyed today's podcast with Je'net Kreitner. What an amazing, amazing lady. Honestly, I'm humbled and just in awe. And that's just the difference that one person can make. So imagine the difference we all can make in the world around us, especially to help our children and teenagers everywhere. So in closing, I'd like to thank you again for joining me for another episode of Engage, Educate and Empower. And we'll be back again, same time, same place next Thursday with another amazing guest. And I think my parting words are, please reach out and check on kids, on adults, on older people during this very, very stressful time with the COVID-19 pandemic. And if you have kids at home, even if you're going stir crazy because you're homeschooling them or because they're under your feet and you're anxious and scared yourself, please take the time to listen and be there with them and to tell them how much you love them. And so I bid you all a safe, healthy, and happy week. Please take care, everyone, and we'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.